Welcome back to Lab at Home with the Museum of Life and Science. As always, we hope you will all help lead our program with your questions, thoughts, and ideas in the moderated chat box. I would love to get to our special guests who we have here today. I think you can all probably see them on our screen here. I would love to have them introduce themselves. I'm sure they can do a better job than I can. I'm going to turn it right over to them.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Ornelas. I am a postdoctoral research associate here at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We are at the Bull Center for Alcohol Studies, where we study alcohol use disorders and many other different addiction type neurobiology research. And then this is my friend Minna.
Hi, I'm Minna. I'm a graduate student in the same building as Laura. And I work in a different lab, but we do similar research.
So we have a lot of different brains for you today. So please feel free to use the chat to ask any questions or if you have any comments. And there's really no special way we're gonna go about this. It's just show you a bunch of brains. So I guess we can get going.
Yeah, I think I might even ask before we get started. I'd love to ask, do we know what a brain is or what a brain does? I wanted to give our friends at home just the chance to tell us, well, what do you know about the brain? What is it? What does it do? Where is it located in your body? We have a friend saying that a brain is what controls us. Okay, so it has to do with stuff that we do. Interesting. What else? What else do we know? Is it located in our body? Where in our body is it located? Go ahead. Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
It is something that is in our head, right? It controls everything that we do. What would you say, friends? Does that sound accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah, your brain controls every aspect of your body, movement, thoughts, processes, everything. It even regulates your heart, regulates breathing. I'm standing here, my brain's allowing me to stand here. Everything that we do is controlled by your brain. So y'all are exactly right. And yes, it is in your head.
We have a very important comment that when these friends ride their bikes, they wear helmets so they don't smash their brains.
Absolutely. Good. That is exactly what you want to do. You need to protect
Very
that brain.
important.
Excellent. So we have kind of, like I told you, we have a few types of brains. So first we're going to show you a kind of smaller brain, and I think it would be really fun if, let me see how we can do this. Sorry, technology is, okay. Yeah, we're going to tilt down. So this is a tiny little brain, and let me know if anything's fuzzy. So can anyone guess the animal that this little brain belongs to? And maybe what these little black things are.
So it's not a human brain. We think it may belong to
Correct.
something else.
This is a mouse, okay. Rotate.
We have one guess. Yeah, one friend thinks it may be a mouse. Any other thoughts? Wow.
What do you think the black things are?
Oh yeah, what do y'all think these little black spherical things are? Yeah.
Ooh. Well, we have another animal guess. Some friend thinks it may be a cat. We have a thought about, we have a couple friends saying that are the black things, are they eyes?
Yes, they are. That is awesome. Great guesses, guys. Y'all are so smart.
We have another friend. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I see frogs. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat too.
Yeah.
While trying to monitor that the brain doesn't fall off my hand.
Sure. So we have another friend who is guessing, is it a frog? Yeah. What kind of brain is it, Dr. Ornelas?
It is very close to a mouse. This is a rat brain. And it is very, very similar to a mouse. The only difference is just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit larger. Mouse brain is maybe a couple centimeters smaller. But what's really cool is, here you can see, hopefully, this split down the middle is this big line there. That's called your longitudinal fissure, and it splits your left and right hemisphere. And y'all are correct; these are your eyeballs. And what's important about that fissure that splits your left and right hemisphere is you have the same thing on human brains, on sheep brains, on all different types of animal brains. You have left and right hemispheres. So this is really important to see that, you know, between animals and humans, very similar kind of like outer structure features that you'll see throughout all these brains. So really good guesses. I hope the eyeballs didn't freak anybody out. I know when I first saw this, I squealed a little bit because it's not every day you see the eyeballs hanging off. It's actually the optic tract that's projecting out of this eyeball that's connecting. Kind of see it flapping right there.
Wow. So
excellent.
they're so large in comparison to the brain. Is that because the brain is small or the eyes are large?
Sorry, say that again. I apologize.
So I was noticing that the brain looks fairly small compared to the eyes, or the eyes look big. Is it that the eyes are big or that the brain is small?
That's a really good question. I think for these is that the eyes are very large in a rat. I mean, they have really good sense of vision. And one of the things we've noticed, like when we do look at the insides of rat brains, is their optic tracts that project to visual systems in the brain are massive, like they're very large. And it just emphasizes the visual system in a rat is really pronounced and developed. Same with olfactory systems too, because these animals need to be able to see and hear and smell things really well to protect themselves from predators, right? So that's a really good point, and their eyes are very, very large.
So they have great eyes, great noses.
Really
That's
good
so
eyes.
cool.
Yeah, and sense of smell. Their sense of smell is like, I think I learned back in graduate school, it's about 100 times, just 100 times better than a human. So they can smell things really well. And sorry, I thought a question was on the chat. And then yeah, so just to be able to protect themselves, be able to smell predators and things like that. So
That's amazing. As we're getting the next brains, I wonder if we can answer this question. We had someone who was asking, are they real brains? And I did say, yes, it is a real rat brain. These are all real brains. How did you guys get these brains?
So these were donated to us for science purposes. And once upon a time, yes, they were in an animal, but this animal has lived through its lifetime, and now their brain has been given to us to allow y'all to see it, and also we can dissect them to look at different structures. We also use them not just for brain outreach, you know, events like this, but I teach neuroanatomy and Minna takes neuroanatomy courses. And these are what we use to learn about the brain. And so it's really important that we have, you know, actual brains to learn and study when we learn all of this, you know, these anatomical structures. So when we go and do our own research, we know what we're doing and what we're looking at. So
what better way to learn it than to be able to see the real thing, for sure.
Exactly. So important to see the real thing. So next we have sheep brains. Oh wait, I just told you what they were. Sorry. So some of y'all, maybe you didn't hear me, but these are actual sheep brains. And they're obviously larger than the rat. And sorry, I'm trying to get the good, there we go, angle. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So as I mentioned on the rat brain, you see, you know, you have this split down the middle, and then you have another left and right hemisphere. So these just on the rat, just like on the rat, on the sheep brains, you have left and right hemispheres also. So everything is what we call bilateral. So you have a left side and a right side. And then another thing we wanted to point out that something maybe wasn't as obvious on the rat brain is you have this really large bulbous structure back here. This is called your cerebellum. And I have a question for some of the kiddos on the chat. Anyone play sports like soccer or baseball or maybe gymnastics? Anyone? See?
What do you think? Oh, I see someone did raise their hand, so someone does.
Okay.
Another friend does.
Baseball, fun sport, excellent.
So we
We do
have
it
a
as
lot
our
of
life.
friends who play sports, it sounds like.
Excellent. So this is a really, really, really important part of your brain. Oh, wow. Christine, you're very active. This is a part of your brain that is really important for athletes, and not just athletes, but specifically it regulates balance and equilibrium and a fancy term called proprioception, and that's just your ability to like rotate and monitor your body in space, or like where you're located, standing, things like that. And so this part of the brain, the cerebellum, actually means little brain in Latin. It's what really helps regulate a lot of those balancing and jumping and all those types of movements that you do in soccer and baseball and things like that. So I wanted to bring that to y'all's attention for when you go out and play sports. Thank your cerebellum for being able to work properly and help you do those movements. And then we'll just flip to the back side. So, oops, sorry. This is what we call the ventral portion of the brain. It's just the bottom portion. This is what faces down towards your, towards your body. And you'll see these really long white features here, really pronounced on the sheep. I told you earlier that a really important senses for all animals are very important, but specifically for smaller, even smaller animals, even like sheep, olfactory sense of smell is very, very, very important. And so these are actually olfactory tracts that project down into regions inside the brain, and all the olfactory sensory information runs down these tracts. So you can see it here. So you see how large those are? You can also see them here.
Oh, I
So
love that.
really, really, really interesting. And we like to point this out because they're so obvious, and even on the camera you can see them.
We had a few questions. I had one was just kind of about your collection. One was asking, how many brain samples do you guys have?
So today, just for today, we have 7. Sorry. And depending on what we're doing, when I teach neuroanatomy, I try to get my students, I try to have them at least have 2 sheep brains each to do different dissections. But for stuff like this, we usually just have a couple.
Sure.
That answers the question.
That makes sense. We have another question. Actually, we have kind of two questions or 2 thoughts about the size of the brain. We have one person asking, why is the brain smaller than the body? And then we have another friend who was saying that they just learned that our brain, which is to say human brains, are twice the size of our heart. And is that true for all animals?
Great questions. Love the question. So the brain is smaller than the body because obviously your body is made up of many different types of organs, right? Bones, heart, lungs, all different regions. Your brain is really only made up of a handful of substances. There's no bones. There's no organs that you have, like internal organs. It's all what we call gray matter. So gray matter is where your neurons, those are kind of the cells that fire what we call action potentials, things that project information to and from your brain. You have white matter, which is this kind of fatty like tissue that allows for information to project to your brain very fast. And your brain is made up of spaces too that's filled with cerebral spinal fluid that acts as kind of this spongy protective substance, so your brain doesn't hit back and forth in your skulls. Made up of blood, things like that. So yeah, your brain is only made up of a handful of things, and it doesn't have all different types of tissue that you find in your body. And then the next question, brain is twice the size of your heart. That's a really good question. I don't know how large your heart is, but what did we say how big the brain is?
The human brain is 3 to 5 pounds. So if the heart is 1 pound, 1.5 pounds, then yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's a, if we had a heart to compare, that would be fun to kind of look, but we don't have a human heart to look at right now. But definitely your brain is larger than your heart.
Yeah,
Definitely.
weight-wise, I loved hearing, yeah, weight-wise, it does definitely sound like it's approximately, depending on the size of each. It sounds like it is at least 2 hearts worth. Um,
Definitely.
I wanted to put in the chat, I know there's the ratio of your brain size versus your body size is called your encephalization quotient. So there's
Interesting.
ways to look up the EQs of different animals. So that might be a way to look up in the future.
Really
Um,
cool.
yeah, because there's so
Awesome.
many different animals with different sizes of brains, different sizes of bodies, all this kind of stuff.
Mhm. There's a really good question. How does the brain control your body? So I wish we had a lot more time. We could teach y'all all about these cortical spinal tracts that run from your cortex all the way to your spinal cord, and then you have motor projections that come again from your brain to your spinal cord and out to your hands and feet, and that allows you to has your brain control different types of movements. And so that's motor, right? And then some people might wonder, well, how do you like sense like how things feel and touch and heat and cold and things like that? You can have sensory information run from your periphery back to your brain. So typically, you know, motor is all out coming from your brain to your spinal cord, and then sensory is coming from periphery back to your brain.
So just like my friend in the chat was saying that the brain sends signals through our nervous system. So it sounds like we're constantly getting information in and our brain is sending, and we were talking about it in terms of it being kind of like electricity. Is that true?
Yes. So as far as the signals, that's 100% true. That's what we were talking about, action potential firing. And you have all this electrical chemical information that runs from your cortex, your cortical regions of your brain. So that's all the hemisphere regions that we just showed you on the rat and the sheep brain. And they project out to all the way down to your spinal cord and then out to your periphery and your hands and feet. And that's all motor type neurons that you know, allow your body to move and to do all those different types of movements.
Wow. So our brain sends and receives electrical signals, and that's how it controls our body. I love that.
Exactly.
Did you see that we have another really good question from my friend Max?
Does having a bigger brain mean that you're smarter? Oh my gosh, yes, that's a really funny kind of misconception. No, it does not. I think the reason there was that misconception is, you know, maybe the larger your brain, the more gray matter, the more neurons or something along those lines that means you're smarter. No, it does not. You know, some people just have, you know, just different sized brains, and whether it's due to genetics or male, female, age as well, it's the brains are, you know, different sizes. And then obviously when you get into things like neurological disorders, those can also alter size of brains, whether you're talking about white matter atrophy or gray matter atrophy. You can also have the spaces inside your brain can actually enlarge due to, again, degeneration or atrophy of your tissue. And so things can just be different sizes depending on the individual.
So yeah, people's bodies are different sizes, their brains are different sizes. There's other reasons that their brains might be bigger or smaller. But in terms of being smarter or more intelligent, it doesn't necessarily correlate to size.
And it looks like Tess has a question. If you cut a brain open, what do you see inside? Well, we could actually show you. So I think this is what y'all are all really here to see. I'm gonna kneel down again for y'all to see this. So actually maybe I won't kneel down, sorry. So this is, what do y'all think this brain belongs to? What species does this brain belong to? Any guesses? Yeah, oh, wow, that was fast. Good job, guys. Excellent. Yes, this is a human brain. And it weighs about 3 pounds, I believe. We unfortunately don't have a scale to weigh it, but I think it's around 3 pounds. So again, like to point out the hemispheres. You got a left and a right hemisphere with that sectioning in the middle. And then I'm going to turn it over to show you that big cerebellum right here that we showed you on the sheep brain, so you can see how large this chunk of tissue is compared to, you know, the cerebrum, what we call the hemispheres together. So our cerebellum is absolutely a major important part of our brain. Again, allowing us to do different types of motor behaviors, as well as learning and memory and different types of cognitive functioning that the cerebellum is involved with. And then, so we'll definitely come back to this, don't worry. I want to answer your question about what, if you cut a brain open, what is it, what do you see inside?
So you saw the whole brain that Dr. Ornelas was holding, but this is just half of the brain. As you can see, it's just one of those hemispheres that Dr. Ornelas was talking about. When we look inside, we see all these different structures and some blood vessels that feed oxygen to our brains. But then also we can see the cerebellum again here, and we see this large ventricle that holds the cerebral spinal fluid that Dr. Ornelas was talking about also. And some of these different structures in here have different functions that Dr. Ornelas probably knows a lot more than me, because she was the one who taught me about them. Right here we have our spinal cord, and again, these structures down here kind of help us with our balance and proprioception, if y'all remember that word. But yeah, this is the inside of a brain, and we have another couple of views that you can see. So this is a side view, or the sagittal cut of the brain. And next, we'll leave this on the tray. Perfect, yeah. And so then this is the coronal. This is called a front and back view, I guess. How do you describe that? So
Yes.
we're looking at the whole brain. This is just cut straight down the middle this way.
Mm-hmm. So think crown, so coronal, think crown. So you have a crown that's put on top of this brain. So you just slice it directly down, and this is what you get. Left, right hemisphere, you got a nice big cerebellum slice here. And then these spaces, like Nina was saying, these are called your ventricles. This is specifically your lateral ventricles. You have an entire system in your brain called your ventricular system, and this system is involved in the flow of cerebral spinal fluid. And as I was saying earlier, cerebral spinal fluid acts as as a lot of different it does a lot of different things, but a major one is it's a protectant type of tissue, or well, it's fluid, but it acts as a like protective spongy substance to prevent your brain from moving too much in your skull, and that's really important. And then here's another coronal slice that Mina's showing you.
So this is further back in the brain, but you can see the spinal cord. So this is kind of probably behind the cerebellum, but you still see these ventricles. And this is just a little further back in the brain. So
Wow.
how hard is a brain?
It's actually pretty hard, but that's actually a really good question. So the brains that we have for you today have been flushed with a fixation solution to make them really, really sturdy, and they don't really deteriorate or fall apart. But if it was just a regular brain that came out of a skull right now, it would be very soft, very mushy. It would be very sticky
Jello.
and jello. Yeah, very, think fatty like. A lot of, you'll have a lot of, it'll be oily and greasy. You know, if you were to feel a real brain that just came directly out of the skull without your meningeal layers, so that's all you have protected layers in your brain, it would be very mushy, very sticky, and it would probably just start kind of like falling apart in your hand a bit. And then, does it feel weird grabbing brains? I mean, the thought about it is kind of weird. I'm holding a human brain. But you know, for educational purposes, it's kind of cool, I would say. I definitely, every time I pick up the human one, it is so cool. Like, you know, we have a human brain in our hands right now. It's not every day you can do that. And then, oops, sorry.
I was just going to say, we were talking earlier about how these specimens were donated quite some time ago, but it's amazing to think about you're holding the command center for a whole human person. That's so cool.
Absolutely. I think that cauliflower comment is hilarious, but so because I wish I had more time to explain all these little like what y'all are calling cauliflower looking structures. This is your hemisphere, your cortex that's cut down coronal, as we just said. But what you can see is there's darker structures on the outside. That's all gray matter that houses neurons and different cortical structures in the brain. And then you can see all this white matter. This white matter is so important because what happens is your neurons project axons that run through this white matter, that's this myelinated fatty tissue that allows for these axons to project all throughout your brain. And that's the difference between this gray matter and white matter. Your gray matter is where the neurons are housed, and then the white matter is where the axons project from. So that's why you see a lot of the gray matter on the outside, and then all inside is a lot of white matter tracks because everything's running to and from this white matter. And then we didn't really talk about the gyri, but do you want to point it out?
Sure. So you guys can see the human brain here, and that you see these ridges and bumps and things. So the ridges, or the parts that are raised, would be called the sulci, right?
Yes.
And then these grooves inside are gyri, and so that kind of increases the surface area, or the amount of brain there is, and kind of packs it all into this nice package that we call our brain. Otherwise, our heads would be really huge if we didn't have these sulci and gyri. Now, if you want to look again at the sheep brain, we can compare.
Nice.
First of all, the size, but also how many sulci and gyri there are. And we see that, at least with the human, this one, there's a lot more sulci and gyri, and so that kind of increases the overall size or surface area. So we have a lot more brain than a sheep does. And I guess that kind of goes back to that question that I can't remember who asked it, but does the size of a brain equal how much or how smart a person is? And kind of, at least across species, if we think about what was that word that
Encephalization quotient.
Yes. So the size of the brain compared to the body, if we think about a whole sheep, they have this tiny brain but a big body. And if we look at a human brain, we have really big brains for the size of our bodies. And so that kind of speaks to that intelligence part that you were talking about earlier.
Sure. I was just going to say, it makes me think about how, if you have a piece of paper, an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, it takes a certain amount of space to hold it. But if you crumple it all up, it fits into a much smaller ball, but the whole sheet of paper is still there. It's kind of like our brain. It's all sort of kind of crumpled together and all folded, but it's still a large amount of surface area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we can get to 2 more questions quickly here at the very end. We have a question about what happens to our brains when we get older.
That's a really good question. So as we get older, there's as I said, gray and white matter in your brain. It can actually start to atrophy depending on your diet, genetics, if you have any like predisposition for disorders. Also, different, substance abuse is a real issue, in society nowadays, and that can affect brain tissue. But ideally, as you get older, you want to be doing things like exercising, have a good diet, things that can really provide nutrients to your brain to prevent any sort of deterioration or atrophy or anything that can impair memory and learning and cognitive processes. So highly encourage y'all to stay active, drink a lot of water, eat your vegetables, everything your parents are telling you, so as you get older and, you have a nice, strong working brain. And then let's see, the hydrocephalus question is a really good question. So hydrocephaly is enlargement of the ventricles. So typically what happens is, I was thinking for a second. There's encephalitis also, but hydrocephaly, yeah, is when you have buildup of fluid. So what happens is your ventricles can start to expand because you have buildup of cerebral spinal fluid in these spaces. And typically how that happens is, as I was saying earlier, you have a ventricular system in your brain, and there's this tissue called choroid plexus that's actually hanging right here. It's just a bunch of vascular tissue that produces cerebral spinal fluid. So what happens is cerebral spinal fluid will fill up these ventricles and then flow throughout your entire ventricular system. And then the fluid goes into two ways down your spinal cord and protects your spinal cord, or it can run laterally, superiorly up to your superior sagittal sinus and excrete through your venous drainage. And then it's just circulated back into your bloodstream. So what happens if there's some sort of blockage with that system, with that flow, whether it's due to an injury, a head injury, things like that, it can produce hydrocephaly where these ventricles start to enlarge. And you can also have long-term hydrocephaly in which someone just didn't realize that maybe they have a tumor or, you know, a blockage of some sort. And, you know, you can do post-mortem autopsy and look at images of the brain and actually show hydrocephaly. So good question for those who had that brain, or question, sorry. Okay.
I see so many more really exciting questions.
I
wonder
know.
if we can maybe do we're going to do maybe 2 rapid fire ones. I wanted to quickly ask, we had a friend who asked, if we drop the brain, will it break?
Oh yes. I would definitely don't never drop brains. I just say that. No dropping allowed. So yeah, I mean it's very you know, very, I'm trying to show you without dropping it myself. So you can kind of see how flimsy that is. I mean, it's really not holding well together because it's only held, it's held together by, there's arterial supply and venous drainage. You have some tissue that's that's connecting your cerebellum and your cerebrum. But I mean, that's kind of, you know, and then some structures on the backside that's holding, or that's connected brainstem into, you know, your subcortical structures here. But it's not very durable, so you have to be very careful.
Especially a fresh brain. If you dropped a fresh brain, it'd probably just splat on the ground. But this, as you can see, it's pretty sturdy. But if it was fresh, it wouldn't even keep this shape in my hand.
Not at all. Yeah, it's a really good point. You know. And then should we do one more?
Can we do one more? I know that we had another question about where we source them. I know we were saying that the brains get donated. Humans can choose to donate their bodies to science when they die. But we had maybe one last interesting one about the effect of poison on the brain.
That's a really important one. And I'm really glad you asked that question, because your brain is going to treat any foreign chemical. So not just like toxins or poison or drugs of abuse, things like that. Anything that is really foreign that can get into your brain, it's going to treat it as a toxin and a chemical, and it's going to try to do its best to excrete it. But one of the ways that, let's just take, so we're at an alcohol center. So we study how alcohol affects brain and neurological functioning. And alcohol is a really interesting substance because it's both hydrophilic and lipophilic, which means that it can bypass the blood-brain barrier, which is the protective brain barrier in your brain, as well as your lipid bilayer and water. You have water and blood and things like that. So it's very easy to get past protective layers and all different types of layers to get to your brain. And so it is very, very, very toxic to neural tissue. It can prevent, it can damage the brain a lot. So, you know, whether you're talking about long-term use to where you can actually start having neuronal damage and tissue atrophy, there's many different types of regions of the brain that are very susceptible to alcohol exposure. But yeah, poison, you know, all of that can really just, it can really damage the tissue and it can produce death, depending on what you're talking about. But That's why you have a lot of protective layers in your brain. You have these meningeal layers that Minna kind of showed you on the large brain, but you have multiple protective layers to prevent toxins and things like that to getting into your brain. So really good question, and I appreciate that as someone who studies substance abuse. It's really important to know how things can hurt and affect your brain.
These are such amazing questions from all of our friends.
No, y'all are doing really good.
You guys have been amazing, and Dr. Ornelas and Minna, you guys have been incredible answering all of our questions, showing us some body parts that we don't normally ever get to see. This has been really, really amazing.
Absolutely. Happy to do our best, and I hope y'all enjoyed it. Glad y'all got to see brains. It's not every day, so, you know, hope you had fun, enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Friends, I hope you'll join me in thanking Dr. Ornelas and Minna for being here with us today. I'm so glad you guys enjoyed it. Thanks so much, friends.
Bye, guys. See you later.